When people think of Audrey Hepburn, oftentimes the first thoughts that come into their minds are images of her classic film career, her poise, and her elegant style. But they often don't realize that there is much more to her than her film career. Audrey Hepburn was a leader in humanitarian work, helping children all across the world affected by poverty. She was a leader in her field, a special ambassador for UNICEF. She touched the lives of many through her work and changed the world with her kindness. Audrey Hepburn was born in Belgium, but spent her childhood divided between Belgium, Holland, and England. In 1939, when the threat of war hit Europe, Audrey's mother relocated the family back to Belgium, where she believed that they would be safe from the war. She was wrong. A year later, in 1940, the Nazis conquered Holland. It was there Audrey would experience horrors of war and poverty that would have an impact on her involvement in charities later in her life.
Extremely difficult for them under those circumstances. No food at all. They were reduced to eating tulip bulbs and cooked grass.
In 1945, Holland was liberated and aid was finally sent to the people of Holland. It had only been 5 years, but Audrey suffered from severe malnutrition, developed respiratory problems, acute anemia, and edema. This would later cripple her career in ballet, but her career in show business would by no means end. After a few small roles in plays and films in England, she was spotted by Hollywood and she became an instant hit. She made 22 films between 1951 and 1966, becoming a legendary star. She became one of Hollywood's greatest style icons and one of the world's most successful actresses. She received numerous awards not only for her film career but also for her work on Broadway. In the late 60s, she retired to take care of her sons and to step out from in front of the cameras. However, she was by no means done. After a break from being in the limelight, she returned once more, but this time she wouldn't be using her grace and charm to sell movies. This time, she would become an ambassador and spokeswoman for UNICEF, or the United Nations International Children's Emergency Relief Fund, a program by the United Nations which provides long-term humanitarian aid and care to children and their mothers in developing countries. UNICEF was created by the United Nations General Assembly in 1946 in order to provide emergency health care and food to children in countries affected by World War II.
She was touched by and deeply moved by the role UNICEF played in her own life.
She was a child of the war and of near starvation who'd been rescued by a UN organization. She not only remembered it, but she felt she had an obligation to give it back.
In 1988, she traveled to drought-stricken Ethiopia as her first official act as an ambassador for UNICEF. It was here that she first saw the suffering of the people, which strengthened her resolve to act.
Something that she couldn't refuse, at first on a very limited basis. But then she was so drawn into the work when she realized the needs that it became almost an obsession.
Audrey assumed a leadership role in humanitarianism, helping children and people around the world.
As we do at UNICEF, it's not just a matter of a child surviving, but giving it a future, allowing it to develop and well and not handicapped.
There were plenty of other stars and celebrities that did charity work, but never before had they lent themselves so fully to a cause as Audrey did. She was a leader in 3 ways. She brought awareness of the suffering of people. She spoke publicly about the suffering to people in positions of power, and she assisted with fundraising to alleviate the suffering. During each of her subsequent trips, Audrey spoke about what she had seen and drew attention to these issues through the press. Her status as a celebrity helped greatly as the media was willing to follow her where she went. Audrey said, "I'm glad I've got a name, because I'm using it for what it's worth. It's like a bonus that my career has given to me." The media brought their cameras and the world's attention to places that were out of the public's view. The executive director of UNICEF spoke about Audrey's import to the cause in areas of war. It's public opinion that's going to keep the pressure on 2 sides to allow the supplies to move. Ms. Hepburn will be going to Sudan next week to keep world attention on it. It wasn't just her presence in the places of suffering where she demonstrated leadership. Audrey was a tireless worker on the behalf of children, undertaking as many as 15 print and broadcast interviews a day.
Helping them, and especially helping them to help themselves. And if I may really give it you in a nutshell, what UNICEF wants to do is to give them a spade to dig their water wells, but not to dig the graves of their children.
Her facility with languages allowed her to spread her message in the US, Canada, Switzerland, Italy, and the Federal Republic of Germany. She met with world leaders in an attempt to gain their support. On April 6, 1989, she testified before the House Select Subcommittee on Hunger. Her goal was to sell the idea of 1% for the Development Fund to the world community. In her testimony, she said, "Less than 1/2 of 1% of today's world economy would be the total required to alleviate the worst aspects of poverty and would meet basic human needs over the next 10 years. Fundraising was another area in which she showed leadership. She designed fundraising cards and hosted ceremonies to raise money for the humanitarian causes of UNICEF. The executive director of UNICEF said, "Television picks up a picture in the Sudan and says, 'Miss Hepburn is there. Children are dying, but there is still something you can do about it.'" This greatly increased funds for UNICEF's work. Because of Audrey's travels, the world saw images of suffering that they could not forget. Along with bringing awareness to the world and public access to world leaders, fundraising helped round out her leadership. Audrey's final journey was to Somalia. The country had recently been divided by civil war and famine.
Audrey always chose to go where the conflict was the harshest. She didn't do it as Audrey Hepburn. She did it as a woman, as a mother, as somebody who saw the human family in jeopardy.
When she arrived there, she described what she saw as apocalyptic, like she had walked into a nightmare. As she had before with all her trips, she told the public of what she saw, about the hundreds of people who died daily.
I think it's safe to say that Audrey Hepburn is the person who made the world aware of Somalia.
She urged the public not to stand by, but to help these people who needed them. Shortly after her return, the United States military went into Somalia full force. She was very glad when they did, says Christina Roth. I think that was something she prompted. However, she was not unaffected by all the horrors that she saw. Anna Cataldi recalls, "She told me what shocked her more than anything was Kismayu, because every child was dead." Audrey had seen a lot of terrible things with UNICEF, but she broke in Somalia. Somalia would be her final trip for UNICEF because not long after returning, she began having terrible abdominal pains, and it would be found out that she had cancer.
The illness developed so suddenly and totally unexpectedly that it was very difficult for us to comprehend, and we were told that she had only 3 months to live.
She spent the last days of her life at home. Her legacy lives on. In recognition of her humanitarian work, she was awarded the Jean Hirschelt Humanitarian Award and the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest award a civilian can receive.
Audrey Hepburn is a tireless worker and a devoted special ambassador for the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund. America is proud to honor Audrey Hepburn, the star whose light is reflected not only on movie screens, but in the bright smiles of children around the world.
She wanted to bring that message to the world, that how simple it was to help children.
She is also so recognized in UNICEF through the Audrey Hepburn Society, a group that continues to recognize financial contributions in her honor. And later, in 1994, her sons continued on her legacy by creating the Audrey Hepburn Children's Fund, which helps to educate the world's children and provide treatment for physically and emotionally abused children. Audrey Hepburn's service as a special ambassador to UNICEF redefined the role. She had used her celebrity status so effectively on behalf of suffering people that UNICEF expanded the opportunities for celebrities to get involved. And finally, Audrey lives on through the people whose lives she touched through her humanitarian work, and she is still widely recognized for her impact. Audrey Hepburn captured the world's attention to the suffering around the world. While many remember her as a movie star, she would prefer to be remembered as a leader in humanitarian endeavors, and her legacy remains very much alive.